my name's Megan. Most people call me Meg, and my pronouns are they, them, and I'm the people experience lead at 9fin. And I'd love to share a little bit about why I joined 9fin and also my background. So I joined 9fin because the founders, Stephen and Huss, and the head of people, Jen, are truly bought into the process of building a people-centric company. And for me, that means taking a non-traditional approach to designing employee experiences. And that kind of links to my background, which is in user experience. I spent the first 6 years of my career working predominantly in user research and product strategy, with actually the majority of the products I worked on being employee-facing. And through my time as UXer, I developed an interest in finding ways to design employee experiences in the way that we design for customer experience. And now I consider PX to be a function of experience design. And by that, I mean designing products, services, and experiences for employees through the process of human-centered design thinking, and agile approaches.
This is why I asked you to be on the show, because you and 9fin are being so considered about the experience that people have when you design whatever it is in the company. So because shaping the people experience will vary for every company, can you help us understand the context that you're operating in? So tell us a bit about 9fin.
9fin is a fintech company with a data, news, and predictive analytics platform for debt capital markets. And our mission is to organize the world's debt information to make it accessible and useful through technology. And Stephen and Huss initially started 9fin to improve the day-to-day working lives of bankers and asset managers. And since then, 9fin has expanded to include any working professional in the debt capital markets, with the aim of helping them to make better decisions and save time in their working lives, which I think is a fantastic mission. And what I find most interesting about working at 9fin from a PX perspective is that not only are we a rapid growing company with almost 130 employees across the UK and US, and therefore working in different cultures, we're also a product company that, whilst we have the typical kind of employees in engineering, product, sales, and marketing, we also have people who work in editorial, credit, ESG, and legal. And those industries are quite different, I would say, in the way that they work from a kind of people experience perspective than what they do in the product world.
There's so much we could learn, I think, from the way you're approaching it. For this episode, we're going to focus on, you shared how you're taking a people-centric approach to your office move. And there were 3 things I thought would be great to highlight, if you could share a bit about them for us. So the first is, as you were approaching your office move, how did you discover what people expected from the new office?
Well, first off, we really wanted to understand how we could design an office environment that people would want to work in. And we did that by asking our people through an anonymous 15-question survey. And despite having worked from home for the last 2 years through the pandemic, we started to notice that our people were already returning to the office of their own accord. So we wanted to make sure that whatever was bringing people into the office would remain when we moved offices, and that was really important to learn. And what we learned from that is that what brings people into the office are the people, even those outside of their own team. I think that as human beings, it's quite natural that we want to build relationships with others and feel a part of something. Our people shared that coming into the office helped them to build a sense of connection with 9fin, and that they enjoyed the energy that came with working as part of a startup. To encourage connection, we really thought about, okay, what kinds of things can we do to really help people to feel like they're connected to others?
And how did you address that learning?
Well, the first thing we did was thought about how can we make the office move an experience in itself, something that people can get behind and get really excited about. And what we decided to do was an office launch party on the day that we opened the doors to really help bring people in and celebrate together. And We hosted a few tours throughout the office so that, when you buy your first home and you're kind of wandering around and looking about, it's kind of that same feeling we wanted to create of people feeling like it was their space and that they could really start to learn, how to use the space based on their needs. And then the other thing we did was that in the first couple of weeks, we made sure to provide breakfast and afternoon tea on the days that we had learned from the survey that people were most likely going to be in the office. I mean, because who doesn't love food, right? The other thing I think we learned was that when it comes to hybrid working, you often hear companies talk about having preset days in the office or designated team areas. And we actually asked our people whether this was something that they would appreciate. And the answer was a resounding no. I think that the true value of having a hybrid and flexible working benefit is in the autonomy to choose where and when to work. And so actually what we've seen is that by trusting our people to make that decision themselves, they've mostly chosen to have that balance of working from home versus working from the office and trying to decide what is most conducive for them to collaborate with the others as well that they're working with.
Yeah, I think you're really highlighting how flexibility is not just saying, okay, you can flex certain days. You're saying you can flex which days. The second thing I thought was great that I'd love you to share about is, I think in a lot of companies, there'll be good intention about designing something that's really considering people's desires. So a lot of work is done designing and creating something, and then you launch it. But sometimes people forget the testing part. So could you share how you actually tested the office move?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you've hit it spot on. In the product world, it's quite common to launch an MVP or a beta version of a product first to make sure that the solution hits the mark and give it the best chance of success. And so for any PX products or services that we develop at 9fin, we've specifically designed in this pilot phase into our design process to make sure that what we're going to launch is actually going to be successful. And so when it came to the office move, I mean, you typically have a few days that once you get the keys, you have some space where you need to set it up. And so we use that as an opportunity to invite a small group to come along and test out the space to identify anything that could be improved to make it more comfortable. And this was super beneficial because if it wasn't for this, we likely would have had 60 people turn up and be frustrated by little niggles around the office that we hadn't noticed. And instead, we had 6 people who came in and who were prepared for the issues that came up in their first few days and therefore weren't too worried about them and who felt empowered to help us fix them. And I think in terms of how we actually helped people to make sure that that was a good experience, some of the things we did as a result were fix up the monitors, make sure that they were in the right place in the desk, making sure people knew where they could go for lunch around the area. I think that's important too, not just the office space, but also the office experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful reminder to think about, irrespective of what type of project or initiative we're working on. Can we test it? Okay, the third thing, which you've touched on, but I'd love to kind of just summarize. I really appreciated that you've taken an analytical approach to the office move. So could you share how you've done that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are a few ways we've been trying to measure success around this. For this office move, the main method of measuring success of the office move was really to observe whether the office was going to be full on the days that we anticipated that it would be as a result of the survey. People said that they were likely going to be in 2 to 3 days a week on a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday predominantly. And that ended up being the case. We very much see that those are the days that people tend to come in, and that's it's really reassuring, I think, that whatever we've done and the way that we've approached this, it's continued the same behaviors as what our people intended. I think also the other thing is that at our previous office, people would often sit and have lunch together no matter what team they were on. And so we were looking to make sure that that behavior would continue because, as I said, people come into the office to spend time with other people. So part of it has been about observation and maybe the more qualitative side of measuring success. Of course, there are going to be things that continue to need improvement. And so the way that we capture that at the moment is through our engagement survey, which we run every 6 months and has some questions around working environment. And then, of course, people can share some thoughts on Slack as well. And now that we're growing, we're starting to see that we're needing to allocate more passes than we actually have desks to enable people to come into the office. So we'll have to think about probably some kind of booking system that allows people to let us know whether they're coming in so that we can share passes between employees. And this kind of booking system can also give us some more quantitative data around how the office is being used to help inform potentially future iterations of the office layout. And I think the other thing to say is that, that's the office move itself, but then there's also the hybrid working approach and how do people feel about our hybrid working and how is it impacting things like performance, but also engagement. And I think really here the main things that we're trying to learn or are learning is that people feel supported to work in a hybrid way and in a flexible way, and that this is a really appreciated benefit. We learned this predominantly actually through another project that we did where we reviewed our benefits and ran some focus groups with some of our people where we asked them to rate the areas of their well-being that were most important to have benefits to support, and then for them to rate in terms of those areas that are important, how much are we meeting their expectations. And this was where we heard that hybrid working is especially appreciated at 9fin, and that our value of family and health come first is role modeled by our leadership team and managers. We also heard that the efforts that we're putting in place to bring people together through team and company socials and diversity and inclusion events have really helped to foster that sense of belonging to 9fin, which is encouraging people to spend more time together. So it's really just that thing of balancing the qualitative and quantitative metrics, I would say.
It's clear you've been so considered in your approach. So for someone else who's going to be working on an office move in their company, what advice would you offer them?
Firstly, I would say don't assume that your people won't want to come into the office because they're lazy or because you'll have to force them. I think that, if you have a strong culture and you create opportunities for your people to build connections with each other, they'll likely be intrinsically motivated to come into the office. So that's the first one. Realize that people, if you build the right environment, they will want to come in. If, however, your people aren't coming into the office, I think the next thing is to try to understand why. Is it because the majority of your workforce are parents and they have responsibilities as a parent outside of their work that are easier to balance when they're at home? Is it maybe because they're neurodiverse and the office layout is too distracting for them? Or maybe it's because they don't feel psychologically safe in the working environment, or maybe they're not engaged in the work or feel a lack of connection to the company, in which case those are the things you might need to address instead. And then finally, I would just make sure that when you adopt a hybrid working benefit, you also think about the other benefits that might need to be put in place to enable equity of experience. And the way to do this, I would say, is by co-creating solutions with your employees. So, for example, for us, to ensure our junior employees receive enough face-to-face time with senior employees, it's really about encouraging them to spend that time together and work together to identify how they can balance their schedules and kind of come up with that sync time. And then also for our remote employees, for example, to help them feel equally connected to 9fin, we make sure to hold our company-wide meetings virtually and to cover the cost of travel and accommodation for things like social events and team days.
I think it's so powerful that you shared to think about equity. If people want to follow more about your work, is there a way they can do that?
Absolutely. You can either follow me on LinkedIn, also 9fin. On our 9fin page, we'll be posting more and more about the work that we're doing and linking to some of our culture blogs as well.